Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here this evening. My name is Tracy Pierce. I'm Superintendent, Lake Washington School District.
And I'm Amy Wallen, the Kirkland Mayor. We're going to do some introductions up here shortly, but just as a couple of introductory remarks, wanted to thank you for coming out tonight. It's a community-driven interest in a very important topic. My nephew, Josh, goes to school here at Lake Washington High School, so I usually see him performing up here, and his safety is of the utmost importance to me. And I know that all of you care deeply about safety in our community and our schools. I want you to know that the city and the school district and the police force work together very closely now, and we will continue to do that. The most important thing about tonight is that we want to hear from you. So we're going to have 3 panels of information, just so we're kind of all on the same page. And then we're going to have time for you to come up and speak to us. So there'll be a lot of time for you to tell us whatever's on your mind. The panels are going to include school facility safety, safety-focused people and programs, and response to threats, including communication protocols. So again, thank you for coming. We all work together to keep our children safe. It really does take a village and a whole community, so really interested to hear what you have to say. And I'm going to introduce everybody that I know, and then Dr. Pierce is going to introduce everybody she knows, and then we'll all know each other. So there's Captain Orsino, and here's Councilmember Pascal, Deputy Mayor Arnold, and I know you guys, but I'm going to let Tracy introduce you. Councilmember Penny Sweet, Councilmember Toby Nixon, and Councilmember Tom Neer. So you have a full complement of our city council members. And then, yeah, just about. And then we have our city managers here, Kurt Triplett, and our assistant city manager, Jim Lopez, and our city clerk, Kathy Anderson, and our fire chief, oh my gosh, Chief Sanford, just Chief. Chief is best. I do know your name. Oh my gosh, sorry. And then our city attorney, I saw somewhere. Oh, there he is, Kevin Raymond. And then we have some of our fine officers here that protect all of us every day, right here. And our communications director, Kathy Cummings. So I hope I got all of the city hall people here. I want you to know how much we care. We care very deeply. And so I'm going to introduce it. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Pierce.
Thank you, Amy. Just a couple other things before I introduce the Lake Washington team that's here tonight. As Mayor Wallen mentioned, we have 3 mini panels of information to present, and then lots of time for questions and answers. As you came in this evening, there was a sign-in sheet if you would like to ask a question during the question and answer period, or you have a comment to share. So if you haven't had a chance to do that at any time during the panel presentations, there's a sign-in over here by Kathy, and she's happy to take your sign-in, so we make sure that we address your question during the Q&A period. In addition, there's forms should you wish to leave comments or questions at the end of the evening, and we'll take all of that and create some frequent answers to frequently asked questions and post those on our respective websites as well. So I want to take a moment to introduce the Lake Washington team that's here tonight. We have 3 board members present. Our president, Siri Bleasner, Eric LaLiberty, one of our board directors, and Cassandra Sage. Okay, great. District staff, we've got Shannon Parthamer, who's our Director, Communications, Community Engagement. We have Matt Gillingham, who's our Director, Student Services. Forrest Miller, Director, Support Services. Barbara Posthumus, Associate Superintendent, Business and Support Services. Scott Emery, Risk and Safety Manager. John Holman, Deputy Superintendent, and we have a couple staff members here in the audience, Rick Burden, Director, School Support for Lake Washington Learning Community, Brian Story, who's Associate Principal here at Lake Washington, Brian Buck, who's Associate Director, Support Services. I think I got everyone. So again, I just want to reiterate, we are all here tonight because we care deeply about students and student safety. And it's great that we have I see a student, I think, here tonight, so I'm glad that you're here, and we're here for you. And so we're really looking forward to sharing some information with you tonight and answering questions that you may have. So before we get into the topic at hand, we do have Siri Bleasner and Penny Sweet, who are going to say a couple introductory remarks on behalf of council and board.
Hi, everybody. I'm Penny Sweet. I'm so glad to see you. I wish I saw about 400 more of you because I think this is a really important discussion. The most important role that a city government plays is that of public safety. The public safety of our citizens, of our every resident, of every member of a congregation, or certainly the students in our schools, is the responsibility of our city. As the chair of the Public Safety Committee, where I serve with Council Members Nixon and Council Member Pascal, I can assure you that we take that role and responsibility very seriously. The whole council does. I can assure you, and you're going to hear about this tonight, that our fire, our police, and our emergency management personnel are ready. They are prepared, they are trained. In the unlikely and hopefully never happening event, if that should happen in our city. I also want to say that my husband is Larry Springer, who's a legislator in the 45th District. He couldn't be here tonight because he just had surgery, but the message that he would like you to take is, after we have this discussion, if you have thoughts and are ready to do some action, to get activated around issues either concerning gun laws, mental health laws, whatever, that energy is really necessary in Olympia. It's going to be a hard push to get anything very radical done in Olympia. The only thing they accomplished this year was some bump stock ban, and I think they tweaked another couple of issues, but that was all they were able to do this year. It will be a heavy lift. So I encourage you to stay upset and outraged at the kind of things that are happening across our country, and be prepared to work hard. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Siri Bleasner with the Lake Washington School District School Board, and thank you again tonight for coming out to speak about school safety and the collaboration between the cities and the schools in ensuring that safety. I would again just reiterate and follow up with Councilmember Sweet around the fact that safety is a vital piece that is important, and our children can't learn in environments where they don't feel secure and safe, and we take that very importantly as well. On March, at the last board meeting on Monday, we actually passed a proclamation on safety in our schools around these issues and the specific things that you are welcome to see online, and I would encourage that. But let's get to the agenda at hand. So again, I would thank you all for coming and look forward to hearing.
So I'm going to introduce again our city attorney. He's going to get us all up to speed with the legal landscape that we're functioning in at this time. This is Kevin Raymond.
Okay, well, hi, I'm Kevin Raymond. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you all for coming. My remarks are going to be focused on the current state of gun law in the United States and the state of Washington, and a little bit locally. It's really just as a starting point for this forum and the community conversation that's happening around gun safety. So I'm not going to be focused tonight in my brief remarks on changes to the law or education or enforcement or prevention or advocacy. It's just a starting point to help us all understand sort of where we start from a regulatory perspective around the issue of gun safety. So any analysis of federal, state, and local law obviously is going to start with federal laws, and obviously, as you all know, they have a national reach. And something called supremacy, the Supremacy Clause of the U.S. Constitution, means simply that it's the law of the land, the supreme law of the land. And the federal government has basically told the states, you can regulate within your states on the issue of gun safety, but you can't you can't allow something that we, the federal government, prohibits. So that's sort of what supremacy means. And it's very different than preemption, which is something that states do that affects what local governments, like the city of Kirkland, can do. So again, state law obviously has a reach that's statewide only, and state law can have, what I mentioned, a preemptive effect, which means that the state, and it happens in most states, I think 41, 42 states, including Washington, the states say, we are going to regulate gun control, gun safety, gun regulation issues across the state, and we're going to fully occupy that field. That's what lawyers say. And what it means is that unless the state specifically tells a local government it can do something, it can't. It's very different than supremacy, where a state can do something as long as it's not prohibited by the federal government. So let me start now with federal gun laws. Like the state constitution, the right to bear arms is constitutionally rooted, and we've all heard about the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms, and that's sort of where this analysis starts. The federal government regulates in a number of different areas. For example, it requires individuals, businesses that sell guns to go through a vetting process and to get licensed. There are a number of broad categories of individuals who are prohibited from acquiring or possessing guns, and I've listed some examples on this slide. For example, individuals who have been convicted of felonies or domestic violence misdemeanors, people who have been determined to be mentally incompetent or who have been subject to involuntary commitment. These are all individuals that under federal law are not allowed to acquire or possess guns. Same, and these are federal issues to a large extent. If you've renounced your U.S. citizen, if you're in the United States unlawfully, if you have been dishonorably discharged from the armed forces, these are other areas where the federal government has said you can't own a gun, and it doesn't matter where in the United States you are. Other examples of areas that the federal government has regulated that the state also has, I've listed some examples. Individuals who are subject to restraining orders based on domestic violence allegations can't possess guns. There are some limits on the possession and acquisition of firearms related to minors, and whether the age is 18, which applies to rifles, or 21, which applies to pistols. There are some limits, but there are lots of exceptions. For example, parental consent is a way that somebody younger can lawfully have possession of a gun. As you all know here, public schools are gun-free zones. You can't have a gun at a school, unless you're a law enforcement officer. And we've all talked a lot about background checks, which is the process where individuals who want a license to carry a gun or to own a gun have to go through a vetting process through a national database system that's administered by the FBI. And not surprisingly, violations of these statutes are mostly criminal in nature. Some of them carry very lengthy prison sentences and also hefty fines. So that's sort of a quick overview of federal gun law. Let's talk for a couple minutes about Washington gun law. Again, like the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms in the state of Washington is rooted in our state constitution. It has, I think there's general agreement that Washington does not purport to allow something that the federal government prohibits, so there's not really a supremacy in Washington, but there is a preemption issue. I was surprised, and maybe some of you were or will be, to know that Washington is considered what's called sort of colloquially as an open carry state, which means that if you have the right to have a gun, you can carry it openly and visibly in Washington, in most places. If you want to conceal a pistol, though, you have to get a concealed weapons permit for your pistol. The prohibitions on acquisition and ownership of guns in Washington is in many respects comparable to those categories that exist at the federal level. And in Washington, we have some additional categories as well. For example, having been found guilty of a crime by reason of insanity, or not guilty of a crime by reason of insanity. Or for individuals who are free on bail or personal recognizance who are awaiting trial on a serious offense, the law says you can't have a gun while you're waiting trial, pending the outcome of that trial. There are other types of convictions, for example, harassment, stalking, domestic violence. Those types of things can make it unlawful to possess a firearm in Washington. Also, extreme risk individuals. This is something that law enforcement deals with a lot. Individuals that have been determined to be at extreme risk to themselves and to others. Those are examples of DV, sexual assault. These are examples of situations under state law where you can't possess a firearm. Like the federal government, the licensing of gun dealers and the background checks for permits and so forth is something that's also required by state law, and not surprisingly, violation of these Washington statutes also are generally criminal and can include long prison sentences as well. Oops, sorry about that. I forgot, I don't have a screen up. So let me talk a little bit about state preemption. I'm going to read it. It's not very long, but it's very comprehensive, and it's just a place for us to start, a sober place for us to start. The state of Washington hereby fully occupies and preempts the entire field of firearms regulation within the boundaries of the state, including the registration, licensing, possession, purchase, sale, acquisition, transfer, discharge, and transportation of firearms. Cities and counties may enact only those laws and ordinances relating to firearms that are specifically authorized by state law and are consistent with this chapter. I've listed on this slide 3 or 4 examples of areas where the state of Washington has said local governments can adopt gun-related regulations, and one of them relates to areas that a city or a county determines would jeopardize persons, animals, property if the discharge of firearms were allowed. A second relates to stadiums and convention centers and doesn't really apply in Kirkland. A third relates to schools and says that a city, a county can regulate where businesses that sell guns are located based on their proximity to secondary and middle schools. And then another one, the final example I have is one that is important here in Kirkland, and it's one that I think the city's a leader on, and that is there are various processes related to drugs and the commission of felonies involving firearms where the guns that are used can be seized, and then after a process that involves due process and an opportunity to contest, forfeited. And local governments can choose to then destroy guns that have been seized and forfeited. And that's something that we do in Kirkland that our police department does. It's something that the Washington State Patrol almost can do, but can't because the legislature didn't quite get that passed this last session. Goes to Councilmember Sweet's comments. Whoops. I think that's it. I want to just close by saying that this is a starting point, and there's lots of conversation that you will want to have together with the others here on the stage around enforcement and education and prevention and advocacy and changes to law. But this is a starting point. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So we're going to move into the presentation part of this evening. And again, we've got mini presentations, about 10 minutes each on 3 topics: school facility safety, safety-focused people and programs in our schools, and then schools' response to threats and communication protocols. So we're going to start with our first speaker. So each set of speakers will speak for about 10 minutes. Then we'll transition to the next topic, and then following the 3 presentations, we will move to the question and answer portion of this evening. So I'd like to welcome our Deputy Superintendent, John Holman.
Thank you and welcome everyone this evening. We wanted to start with school facility safety, but also want to outline how do we think about safety in our schools, ensuring that we have a comprehensive emergency management plan. It's kind of a framework which has elements that help us align our thinking, our resources, and our strategies A CEMP has 5 main elements. You can see there from left to right, starting with prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. And really tonight, we're going to focus on the first 2 categories there of prevention and protection. By and large, those are many of the questions that we've received as a school district. I know the city has had interaction with citizens around many of these topics as well. But you can see from the list there that there's a lot of overlap with some of the different activities that we do as a school district that fall within the different categories. So when you think about prevention, it's about what are the strategies and what are the things that we're doing to help prevent either violence or students from reaching crisis. And so when you think about our overall school culture, maintaining a school culture that's inclusive, that's accepting, where students feel they have a voice, that's a very important part of this overall safety of a school. Ideas of see something, say something. Making sure that we have an environment and accessibility so that students, staff, community members, when they see something that doesn't sit right, they have an avenue to be able to express that to the school district administration. We actually have an anonymous tip line where community members, staff, students can actually provide that information through text or call to be able to let us know when there's a concern. Those anonymous tips are followed up on to ensure that if there was a wonder about a threat, that we can actually evaluate that and find out that information. You'll hear later tonight about some of the staff that we have that provide supports in the prevention category, social emotional learning, and some of our partnerships. That's really that prevention category. And then when you think about the protection category, you're going to hear a lot about that tonight as well. Thinking about the physical safety of our schools. And I know there's been lots of dialogue and conversation about how do we ensure that our schools are physically as safe as possible. And so I'll touch on that in my comments tonight as well. But also in our protection category, our school resource officers, one that we have here this evening. Our secondary schools also have campus security monitors. And those are staff that are here just to be a second set of eyes and ears on campus to be able to observe not only students, but anything that doesn't seem right to them as well on the campus and to be able to address that. We're also going to talk tonight about threat protocols and how we really collaborate with our law enforcement agencies to ensure that anytime there's a threat that we have that understood and taken action. When you think about the physical facility, we think about it in a couple of different goals. The goal really is to provide 2 layers of physical protection in our school facilities. That's what we're working towards. With the first being to prevent unwanted access to the interior of the school from exterior doors. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the things we're working towards in that category. And the second is to prevent unwanted access and limited unwanted visual access to the interior of the schools and classrooms. So if you think about those 2 goals as I provide my remarks, that's really what we're working to and always evaluating and assessing to improve. So I want to start by talking about the work to date. So what are the facility safety measures that we have implemented to date in this category? So with the implementation of any of our safety measures, we rely on our local levy dollars to be able to fund these things. And so from our 2014 capital projects levy, we had 3 specific things that we were able to implement. One of those was interior classroom door locks. And one of the things that we found as we were evaluating our lockdown protocols is that when a school went into lockdown, there were many of our classroom doors that a teacher would have to open, go outside of the classroom door, lock, and then re-enter the classroom. And to ensure a very successful lockdown, we actually put the ability for teachers to conduct a lockdown from the inside of their classroom. So all of our classroom doors now have locking capability from inside the classroom. It's kind of a logical step to ensure a lockdown is done in a manner and method that is efficient and effective. And so that's one of those safety measures that we implemented from our 2014 capital projects levy. Another part of that evaluation was our interior classroom door shading, or window shading, excuse me. And so when you think about a lockdown, it's you're locking the door so that physically someone can't get in, but it's also the visual access. So being able to draw shades that allow any individual not to be able to see into the classroom, to see what's there, and that's kind of the interior work that we did around our lockdown procedures. And from that levy, we also started the initial phase of our building access controls. And so access controls are being able to put our doors on electric access. You might think of it as a card reader. That's just one portion of the system. And so we have started to phase that in, and we are almost completed with that project. But that's just the initial step of that system's capability. And so I want to talk about now moving forward. We did pass our 2018 capital projects levy, and so are able to actually implement the next phase of that key card access system, which gets to our goals around being able to secure our schools. And so with the expansion of the building access control system, there's a few different things that we'll be able to accomplish towards our goals. First, it's being able to schedule door access for student passing. So if you think about all doors that are needed for students to be able to navigate a school. So you think about Lake Washington High School. Students are, between classes, they're moving in and out of the building, and that's a required part of being able to build a master schedule, students getting to class. With this system, with the expansion of this system, it actually allows us to put all of those exterior doors on a timer so that they're open during passing and they lock when passing is completed. And so it's a way that we don't have to physically go around and lock each door, but we're able to unlock when they're needed and lock them when passing is completed. The second thing it allows is at the push of a single button, it allows us to lock down the school for all exterior doors. So with the expansion of this, as we put more of our exterior doors on this system, and we build protocols around keeping our doors closed and locked, in the event of, let's say, during a passing before school, we need to lock down an entire school. With one press of a button, we can ensure that all doors have the ability to be locked. That's another part of this system. And the third part of this system, which we've received a number of questions about, and the system has the capability of, is, and I will call it a buzz-in system. So if you think about all external doors being locked, and someone coming to the front door of the school and it being locked as well, but there being a camera there with access in the school office or whatnot, and someone needing to identify why they're there, that they should be there, and the purpose, and them being able to be allowed in or buzzed in from the interior of the school. This system has the capability of that, and we are currently in our feasibility study for the expansion to a buzz-in system. And there's been questions about what do we mean by feasibility? It's either feasibility in order to do or feasibility how. We are working towards this, and it's about how do we implement this, not do we implement this. And so we are working towards this. And I want to jump down. What's the goal of this? It's so that schools can lock all exterior doors. Because we only want people in our schools that are there for the express purpose of supporting students, that they're there with a purpose and a reason. And so that's the intent behind this. We know it's going to be a change of practice for all of our communities, but it's a change of practice that we believe in. So implementation of this would be for all schools, because we believe this is essential and critical for each and every one of our schools. The project really is about the installation of cameras and the other equipment that it takes to be able to implement this system. And the timeline for this is summer 2018. A couple of protocols I just want to touch on in closing of my remarks. Currently, we require all of our district staff and any visitors to our campuses to wear badges or have ID. And why is that? It's because at any point in time, we can see, does someone have the appropriate badging? And if they don't, it really is incumbent on all staff members to be able to ask that individual either to direct them to the office or ask them their purpose. Visitors signing into the office is not only a safety measure so that everyone has appropriate badging, but if we have a lockdown, we can account for anyone that's on our campus, and it's really a safety measure for those individuals as well. All of the volunteers that we have in Lake Washington School District go through a screening process. They're checked through the Washington State Patrol to ensure that the volunteers that we have in our schools are safe to work with students. Additionally, we are implementing a protocol of locking all of our portable doors. This is something that also comes with, if you have a locked door, you also need to be able to see who's outside of that door. So with the locking of doors, we're also installing peepholes so that our staff can see who is at the door if someone is knocking, which also provides another layer of security for our students. So I will close my remarks with that and pass this over to our next panel.
Good evening. I'd like to talk a brief minute about, about our partnership with the City of Kirkland Police Department and our school resource officers. The partnership enables us to have quick and rapid emergency response. Those officers that are in our schools establish working relationships with those schools, with our families, and with our students, and the administration of the building. These are armed, commissioned, uniformed officers that are there in our schools, and we have 2 full-time officers with the City of Kirkland. One is here at Lake Washington, one is at Juanita High School. Those 2 officers also can assist with any of the schools within Kirkland. So they frequently are available at the middle schools and elementary schools and providing services there, but their home base is in the 2 high schools. I'm going to ask Officer Hardesty to talk a little bit, or Captain Orsino, about some training and things that they go through to be a school resource officer.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you, and Officer, I promise Officer Hardesty is going to talk as soon as I'm done bringing the message of the chief and the fine officers of the Kirkland Police Department to you. I carry their message tonight. Thank you for having me. The frequency of school shootings has unnerved communities across America. We'd like to think that it won't happen here in Kirkland. We pray that it doesn't happen, but we train that it will. Our officers are courageous. We know it can happen anytime, and there's not one of us in the department that will not enter a school in a courageous manner. We work alongside the as brave firefighters who are rendering aid. All this changed in Columbine, 1999. We used to stage and wait for SWAT to show up. Those days are gone. We can't do that. We train to respond. If there's one officer goes in. We give them extra gear to put on and another vest on top of their vest, helmet, and they go in. They go to the sounds of gunshots. They go to where the students are running from. We've trained on this since 1999, and it's evolved over many years. Through Sandy Hook, we learned from Virginia Tech that we need to bring tools to open doors out instead of bashing doors in. We learned from Marysville Pilchuck that you're going to step over many a people before you get to the shooter. These are just facts. This is what we learn. We are all up for the challenge, and we do it from our heart because somebody's got to stop this. And our people, our officers are ready to do that. What can you do right now? I mean, I'm seeing familiar faces I saw the other day at City Hall. You're not the people I got to reach. The people we got to reach are still out there. We got to get them in here. We got to get them involved. We got to get them looking at Instagram. We got to get them looking at Facebook. We got to get them being nosy into their schools' lives. If you're not nosy, you don't know what's going on. I've got a sophomore in college. I'm as nosy as I can be. I'm not her friend anyway. She's at that age, so why not? So I just want to, I don't want to belabor it. I want you to understand that you have a very courageous fire department and police department. We will go in, eliminate the threat, and we will take care of any injured. We pray we don't have to do that, but we are ready to do that. Officer Hardesty is one of the finest SROs that we have. In fact, he's one of two finest SROs we have. He is up here tonight because he can tell you what can happen when you're at the school here. He would be the first one here, and he would be responding. We would bring in troops from everywhere. There would be more police vehicles and fire vehicles, and that'll fit in the parking lot out here. We have what you call a rapid responder. We could pull up Lake Washington High School, know exactly what's in every room and where it is on campus. And we train in the ICS. You saw it up there on the earlier slide. We train in the incident command system. So once the initial chaos is done, we are organized, and we are going to take care of the situation the best we can, and we're ready for that challenge. With that, I will give you Officer Hardesty. Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you, Captain. It looks like we got in through.
You're going to do Alice?
I'll go into Alice.
So if you do a couple more. Yep. There you go.
Next one.
There you go.
Perfect. So I am the school resource officer here at Lake Washington High School. And yes, police-wise, I will do my job. But what I also do, what a school resource officer does, there's a triad is what they call it, where yes, I do my law enforcement type of work here, but also I'm a informal counselor for the students, and then also a guest speaker in their classrooms. So I come into the classrooms and I'll speak. But also I bring a lot of my knowledge and training to the staff. And it's not just my knowledge that's going to keep your kids safe, it's what we're teaching our staff members. During an active shooter or violent intruder event, we need our staff members to be informed and educated on what their options are if that event is brought to their school. We teach something that's called ALICE. The federal is Run, Hide, Fight. You may have heard Run, Hide, Fight, but in Sandy Hook, what happened in Sandy Hook, they trained Run, Hide, Fight, and for 14 minutes that shooter had access to the students and no one called. Run, Hide, Fight really leaves out calling 911 and getting 911 started. And so Run, Hide, Fight, they're doing these things, and also what they were practicing there was one form of, only one person was responsible to call as well. And so it was one failure point, and if that person is taken out like it happened at Sandy Hook, no one else is thinking I need to call and get 911 on the way. So we adopted ALICE. And ALICE principles, that first one is going to be alert. These don't go in order of do ALICE first. These are all just options that we teach our staff. And we're also teaching our students about it at the age-appropriate instruction level that we can, which I'll get to later. But ALICE starts off with alert, which means if you are in the classroom or you are in the school and you hear what's happening or sounds of violence, you need to yell and let everyone know what you hear and call 911 and get 911 started. ALICE protocol is that time. All the other options or all the other things are what happens to keep you safe in that 3 to 4 minutes for police to get here. Maybe we're faster than 3 to 4 minutes, maybe we're a little bit slower, but the average we're looking at 3 to 4 minutes. In Kirkland, I'm already here on campus, but we're gonna say the rest of the principles are what you're gonna do for those 3 to 4 minutes, okay? So alert, you want police to get on the way here and you wanna say what's going on. L is for lockdown, but it's not just lockdown, it's lockdown plus is what we teach. It's a barricade of the door. It's locking down, but barricading, because doors can be broken. They can be pried. We want it to where if that door is breached by that bad person, that they have to get through chairs and tables and all sorts of whatever you can do to barricade yourself through to where they don't want to have to deal with this hassle. They want to go to a soft target, which we teach, which would be an unlocked door and a lot of people who are just sitting underneath a table. We want it locked down, barricade, okay? And so after that is inform, which is let police officers know what you hear, what you see, and what's going on. So, or other people, right? If you can get on the megaphone or the PA and say the intruder is in the commons, well, that allows everyone else to know where the violence is happening and if they go on to L, C, or E, which we'll get to. But by informing and letting people know, it gives us active information on what's happening. And also police to know if we have 1, 2, what they're wearing, male, female, what type of weapons, where are we going? That way I can show up and I can come to the west side of the building knowing the person's in the west side of the building. If I can get that information, it's important. C is for counter. So run, hide, fight. The idea of fighting is not something that we're trying to say. I'm not trying to have my teachers go out and ninja some guy or, do some like SWAT. They're not SWAT operators. They're not out there to go fight and box or do something to this person. We teach them to counter, to bring it back to where it's in our favor of either, using a fire extinguisher to spray in the face of this person and then hitting them over the head with the empty fire extinguisher, or throwing cans, throwing books, yelling, screaming, swarming. You're countering this person, not boxing, standing up with them, trying to fight, where we are going to counter and try to bring the control back to us. And that's what we teach our teachers. We're not asking you to go out and seek it. We're asking if the fight is brought to you, they get through that lockdown, barricaded door, it's brought to you, what are you going to do to counter it? And that's by swarming, throwing things, yelling, spraying, whatever we can do to disrupt what this person was doing. And then E is evacuate, which is primarily what we want you to do. If that option is there, that's what we say. And it used to be super accountability for the kids, like Johnny, Susie, like I got to make sure each one is in line. Now it's, I need you to just run, and you need to run out into the community. And if we're on the west side, you're going to run to the lake. If you're on the north side, you're going to run to Costco. If you're on the south side, we're going to go. And you have these north, south, east, and west ideas of where you're going to tell them to go, and they're just going to keep running, because the accountability aspect, we would rather have them out in the streets and running than accounted for in the classroom in a poor situation. And so we give the teachers we empower the teachers to say, you can tell them to run and just go. And you don't have to, it doesn't have to be in order in a slow professional lineup. No, we're just gonna get them all out. And so all these options are taught and instructed. It started with just classroom instruction for the teachers. Then we went to tabletop exercises with the teachers. And now in our comprehensive high schools, we're going through actual drills where I have a megaphone and I have a air horn, and I'm simulating violence, and the kids and teachers are deciding, do we run or do we evacuate, do we lock down or do we counter? And we're actually getting into full drills. And so it's age appropriate, and so far that's where we're going, live drills in the high schools. And then down lower is educating the teachers, because a kindergartner, they don't need to know, what am I going to do? Their whole world is their teacher, right? And so if we teach the teacher what to do, then they're going to say, hey, what are we doing? And the teacher knows what options they're had. So that's our philosophy and our idea behind Alice, and that's what we're teaching. And I feel if we have questions and answers after, but I'll get back to you guys.
All right, thanks, Officer Hardesty. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the other staff and partnerships that we have in place from a preventative measure within our school systems. So in addition to our school resource officers, we also have campus security monitors, and their roles on our schools are both for supervision. So we have a responsibility for supervising our students. They're moving throughout the campus. Between class periods, they're checking on areas, they're helping to check doors. But they're also extra adults that engage students in conversations and find out what's going on. And they're often the ones that students will come to and maybe report concerns that they have. And so they're an important part of our school communities. And our school guidance counselors. Our school guidance counselors are at every level. At the elementary level, our school guidance counselors are working with students in the classrooms. This year we adopted Second Step as a social-emotional curriculum, and our counselors are working with students to teach them self-regulation, self-awareness, navigating social situations, skills that we hope will prevent students from getting to a point where they're aggravated or feeling alienated, and that they have skills to be able to cope with stress or anxiety and depression. And then also for other students to have skills to navigate situations with their peers. And they're often another kind of first person or first staff member that students go to when they have concerns either for themselves or oftentimes about other students. So they definitely play an important role in our schools. We also have, at the secondary level, we contract with two different groups. We contract with Evergreen Health and with Youth Eastside Services to have behavioral health counselors and chemical dependency counselors. They're qualified in our schools, so that if we have concerns about a student, they'll do initial kind of triage care and then help students that need access to ongoing long-term care for their mental health or behavioral health needs. And so having those people in the school setting allows us to get those kids access to help much more quickly. And also gives us access to outside supports. We also have on-site mental health counseling at many of our schools at every level. Because in some situations we have students that aren't able to, for a variety of reasons, go out into the community and access care in a clinical setting. And so in those situations, we have partnerships with YES, Youth Eastside Services, Sound Mental Health, Consejo, and Asian Counseling Referral Services to actually come into our schools. And we've been partnering with these agencies through Eastside Pathways, which is a collaborative action network, to actually see how we can make our system, we can work together and make it as efficient as possible so that we're getting kids access to the care that they need for when they have mental health needs. So those are some of the preventative measures and supports of people that are in our school systems that we have in place. And since I'm going to have Scott briefly talk about some of the safety drills in addition to Alice that we do, and then we'll talk about how we respond to threats. So, and Officer Hardesty, you get to come back up for that too. So,
just briefly, our safety drills are every month. Schools follow a schedule for our school year. So the state requires drills monthly while school is in session, including our summer schools. And that schedule keeps everyone moving through the year doing the same drills. The schools pick the day and time that they want to do those drills in the month, and they coordinate them locally at their school site. But that schedule keeps us all in the same place moving forward. The drills are adjusted for age appropriateness, as we talked about a little earlier, so that a drill at a high school looks a little different than a drill at an elementary school, and it's appropriate for the age group of kids. The variety of drills that we have, you see here, we do our Alice work. We have lockdown drills specifically to the L in Alice, but we do the fire and evacuation and all of those things. The state does outline some of the requirements for us. The district has chosen to do more drills than what the state requires so that we are sure to give our schools opportunity to drill all of these safety procedures.
So I'm going to we'll talk a little bit, and Shannon Parthman is going to join us as well, about how we respond to threats and how we communicate in response, our communication protocols in response. So we want to respond to every report of a threat as quickly as possible. And kind of like in Alice, these steps aren't necessarily steps that are always taken in the exact same sequence. So what happens when we get report of a threat, oftentimes it comes from parents or students. So we're really reliant upon our community to let us know when something doesn't quite seem right. And we're more than happy to follow up on that. And so we have parents that will send us pictures of something that their child shared with them on social media that just didn't quite feel right, and we will follow up on that. So usually that comes into a school administrator. They'll connect with their school resource officer right away and make an initial determination of kind of the nature of that threat. And based on that context, they're going to take some initial action to mitigate that threat. So that could be potentially putting the school into lockdown. It could be securing a specific student, removing them from the classroom, having them supervised so that they continue to take, kind of do their investigation. We'll make police contact. Where we have school resource officers, we'll contact them right away, let them know, and I'll have Officer Hardesty talk a little bit about kind of how we have two parallel processes. The school is going to have its process, and then the police will have their process as well. One of the tools that we will use quite often with students if a student makes a threat is we're going to take a little bit of time for ourselves to be able to do an investigation, do some analysis, and make sure that student can be safe at school. So under state law, we're given the authority to issue what's called an emergency expulsion. And so for 10 days, we can temporarily remove a student from school. Basically, it's a timeout while we can sort things out. So that's a tool that we employ quite frequently to give us time and space so that we can really walk around the issue and understand that. Our administrators will do an investigation, and they'll also do that hand in hand with our school resource officers. If there's specific individuals that have been threatened, we'll also notify those individuals so that they can be aware and take whatever steps they personally need to take. If we get to a point where if we remove a student from school for a threat, so when we emergency expel students, we require risk assessments. That is a condition. We actually have a policy on that when a student's removed from school, they will go see a mental health professional and have a risk assessment done. And then we use that assessment as well as what we've learned from our investigation to be able to inform our next steps, which is when those students, if they're returning to our school, putting a robust safety plan in place. So I have Officer Hardesty kind of talk about the parallel track that he goes through when we have a threat.
Nice, thank you. Well, I do want to say that I really you have outstanding administration. Like, I have my associate principal here, and we work amazingly as a team. My principal's awesome, my associate principal is awesome, and they know what they're doing when it comes to the school aspect, and I know what I'm doing when it comes to the police aspect, and we really work together to try to, when a threat happens, we have to determine what is going on. So the school really locks in this emergency expulsion. They say, hey, let's remove them for these 10 days. We'll do our investigation, you do yours. We had this, I always like to bring up the great ones, right? Where I had these parents earlier this week who were in their kids' Instagram, and they saw their kid Instagram photo of a handgun that said, they were a school shooting, right? And their parent, it didn't even make it to where it came to me. It was their parent driving their kid down to the police department and saying, look what he did this, and he needs to figure out what is going on, right? And even something like that where the parents caught it didn't make it to like the news or anything, but what did police do? We investigated him, we checked out the credibility of the threat, got our command notified, detectives involved, detectives go out to the house, they do their investigation, we determine, is that photo, is it a call for help? Is there anything that's possibly going on with him that this is possible, right? And the school's doing their side saying, hey, we're going to EE him, and then we're going to wait, emergency expel them, and then we're going to do our investigation, and coincide with your investigation, and then the school then says the safety plan has to happen before they come back. That's even for that Instagram post. Safety, risk assessment has to be done, and then a safety plan. So when that child comes back, before they come back, we sit down with law enforcement and all admin and we say, what is your safety plan? What are we looking for? And they have to abide by the safety plan as well. So it puts me on the radar of what he or she is to do. Admin knows what to do. Teachers know what to do. And we're looking out for a student even for a threat that's something like that. And we deal with these. And we know what we're doing when it comes to this these threat assessments and when we have this. Additionally, getting back to that Alice principle and what happened, we had a report of someone who possibly had a rifle on school grounds at a middle school. And so the school made that alert. They went into lockdown, brought police in. It was determined that it was a umbrella, right? Which is great, but the school locked down, set it up. We did all the things that were to protocol, and it's because we're drilling this, we're training it often. And so we're going into Alice, and then we're also dealing individually with students. I forgot to plug on this last one, not that I'm paid by them or anything, but alicetraining.com. You could educate yourself at alicetraining.com. You can talk with your kids about it to where you're like, hey, how about we talk about it? Because these Alice principles aren't just for school. They're when you go to a concert or you go to the movies or you go out. So it's also good for you to know this so you can educate yourself and then also talk with your kids about it. Hey, we're going to the fair, and we have an idea of what we may do because we don't want you to freeze. You hear fight, flight, or freeze. We want you to not freeze and try to figure out what to do. It's either we're going to fight or we're going to flight out of this. And by thinking about Alice and training yourself, you can prepare yourself for a situation that may arise. But it's just keeping your head up and building this mental Rolodex in your mind of what you may do. I forgot to talk about that on that last one, but that's really what we do when it comes to school discipline and that hand in hand with the criminal aspect of it.
I think one last thing before turn it over to Shannon Parthmer around communication is so I mentioned that if there's like a direct threat towards a specific student, that we'll communicate that with that student and their family. There's a federal law that regulates student privacy. It's called FERPA, and so that's where we look to in terms of we want to communicate as much as possible to students in our school community, but also that there are limits, federal limits on what we can share about specific students. So that one of the things we want to talk about with families is the process that we go through. And when we're vetting and being able to point to that. So. But I'm going to turn it over to Shannon now.
Thank you. So just a couple quick comments about communication protocols. It's always our intent to communicate as quickly and accurately as we can, and that involves the district working with local police to make sure that what we're communicating and when we're communicating it will not interrupt their investigation in any way. So we can't always send something out the minute something's happening. Our administrators are busy trying to secure the school and make sure that the students are safe. So as soon as we have accurate information to share, we do try to share that out. In addition, we're enhancing our communications. Our safety webpage on the district website will be updated within the next couple weeks with more detail for families because we know you want to know more about what we're doing to keep all of your kids safe. In addition, we'll do additional safety features and connections, our district newsletter, and then we'll also share those out to our schools so that they can post them in their newsletters. So if you missed the district newsletter, it should be in your school newsletter as well. Really quickly, sorry, I missed a step. We use School Messenger when we send information out to families. If you are not getting notifications or you don't feel like you're getting all of the notifications you could get, if you're a parent in the district, you go to Skyward Family Access and then Skylert, and you'll be able to see all of the phone numbers that we have on file for your family, and you can tell us what kind of communications we can send to each of those phone numbers and email addresses. And also make sure that under the SMS section that you have put in your contact information that can receive text messages, and you've said yes when you get a text message asking if it's okay for us to text you. That's the only way those texts will go through. Just one more quick slide. What can parents do to help? Volunteer at your school. Become a watchdog. For those that are not familiar, it's Dads of Great Students. So it's a father figure program. That's a great one in elementary schools. Lunch buddy program. We have walkabout programs at some of our schools. So just getting involved in your school community is very helpful. If you do, it's been brought up before, but Safe Schools Alert is a great way to report issues that you're having. Of course, if it's an emergency situation, dial 911 and tell them what you want to report. But that Safe Schools Alert number, you can call, you can text. There's posters up at all the schools. It's on the front page of our website. It's all over our website. So that's really a great place to report tips that you may have, and that it can be done anonymously.
Great. Thank you so much to our panel. Let's give everybody a big round of applause. Now, what we'd like to do is transition to the question and answer portion of this evening, and we have 4 people who have currently signed up. If you haven't signed up to ask a question, you can still do that. Kathy is over here, and feel free to go and sign up to ask a question. We will start with the 4 people who have signed up, and the first person is Dorothy Wolf, and we're going to ask you to come to, is it this microphone, Kathy? Great, come to this microphone, and we've got a big panel of experts, so ask any question you like or make any comment, and we will do our best to answer your question.
First, I want to thank everyone for being here and for having this forum. I really appreciate that. I have an 8th grader at Rose Hill Middle School who will be attending Lake Washington High School next year. I was at a meeting yesterday when they had about school safety, and ever since she started going there, Officer Capture is there, and he's there every day. That is his school. And I learned that in Redmond, every high school and every middle school has an officer there. I want to know, what can I do to get it so that in Kirkland, the 7 schools are not shared by just 2 officers, but have 7 officers?
Thank you for your comment and your question. I will start with some information and then invite others who would like to share. You are correct. We do, as a district, serve and partner with 3 different cities, Kirkland, Redmond, and Sammamish. And through those partnerships, there is currently different levels of service in terms of school resource officers. And the difference today with Redmond is that apparently they had passed, the city of Redmond had passed a safety levy at some point that is helping to provide funding for additional school resource officers. And so that's why in Redmond, we have school resource officers at the high school and both middle schools. In our other jurisdictions, Kirkland and Sammamish, the model is the same. We have school resource officers at our high schools, and then they're available to serve at the middle and elementary. And then, of course, I shouldn't forget, we also have unincorporated, or King County. So our schools in King County, we have 2 part-time resource officers at the middle and high school for those 2 schools in King County. We are beginning conversations with our jurisdictions to learn what it would take, both on the district side in terms of resource and investment, and on the jurisdiction side in terms of personnel and resource as well, to see if what it would take to create more equal service level amongst all of our schools. So those conversations are underway today. Is there anybody else who wants to add anything? Okay. Okay, great.
So next we have Jessica Funt. And just so you know who's next after that, it's G. Bernard Hassan.
Hi. Yeah, again, thank you for having this forum this evening. This is super helpful. I have a daughter at Juanita High School, and she was at school the day that there was the not quite a lockdown and then the evacuation for the fire drill. And one of the comments that I heard, her and her friends say is that as they were being evacuated out onto the lower football field, they were thinking about that fish in the barrel type thing, going down to a low spot with high ground. So they get it with, they're with this Alice training. They're aware that they're targets. So And I do appreciate that there is the training. It is important. But it brings me to a couple of things that are out there. One is, as part of the Alice, is there a debrief where the kids can have a little emotional kind of debrief about what just happened after the drill? I know at work we had the Alice training a couple years ago, and our blood pressure was up. It was like, whoa. And we had a little informal debrief amongst coworkers. So that's my first question is, what's the debrief so that the kids can emotionally sort of readjust back into that school environment? I guess 2 of 3 questions here, or comments, is the second thing is, I don't know if everybody's seen kind of the video of there's a resource officer somewhere else in the country who is shooting blanks in the school to simulate the violence, but this is gunshots that are happening in the school. That distresses me because I know that the kids are getting it with the Alice training, and so I guess the question is how much simulation is Kirkland willing to do within the schools? And I think that we need to be cognizant of the emotions of the students. And then the third question is, there's been a lot of talk about arming teachers in the schools. I think it's great that we have resource officers who have had hours and hours and just, this is their job. These are the specialists. These are the people who are trained to carry guns. Teachers are trained to teach kids. And so, as you can tell, I am not comfortable with teachers carrying any kind of weapons in the school, or haven't had the training that police officers are. So I'd like to hear kind of what it sounded like from the introduction the city attorney gave, that safe schools are gun-free. How is that reconciled? If that's a federal thing, then how is it then in other states there's even a discussion of having other people carry guns at the school? Thank you.
We struggle with reality training all the time. Where'd she go? We struggle with reality training all the time. We'd like to make it as real as we can for the officers, but there's a limit. And blanks inside of a school, in a gun, making sounds, loud sound, isn't a great idea. Officer Hardesty uses an air horn. There's a distinct difference. The kids get the idea of what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to do it. Gosh, you're not going to see blanks inside the school. It's a dumb idea. I can't put it any more plain than that. I don't know where they're doing that. We're not going to use firecrackers on the ground. We don't need to simulate the noise. We need to simulate the action or the reaction to the action. And so the action really doesn't matter to us. It's the reaction. So we'll keep it as real as we can for us, and we get really real. But for the students, let's see how they're going to react to the action. And I'll let Officer Hardesty talk about the debrief. Also, in our trainings, when we train, it's a great idea to debrief because you learn from the debrief. And so we debrief everything, as I'm sure you probably do too.
Yeah. We traditionally will do this during homeroom, and there'll be a video first that goes over Alice principles. Prepare them, remind them again, who can remember, like I just went over Alice, who can tell me what I is, right? It's sort of tough to remember these things. So we'll do it during homeroom, and then we would do the drill, and then come back to homeroom and have time to talk about it. Absolutely, it's been thought about in our admin, they plan for these type of things. You did bring up that your daughter thought about how going on to this was something like, oh, where are we at? We're bringing new concepts of not just going up and lining on the 5, the 10, and the 15, back of the football field, but having areas that are away from the school as your meetup points now, instead of just traditionally we will only go to one spot. And that's something that we're just adapting and we're working with now. Our next drill that's coming up next, we're making that happen here. And so we're constantly adapting those types of trainings and thinking about that. And I'm glad that your daughter's already thinking like that. That's fantastic. Hit the blanks, and then arming teachers in safe schools. probably above my pay grade, so I will, yeah.
We are very fortunate and believe strongly in having armed law enforcement experts in our schools. And if we're going to arm anybody, it's going to be these people who do this for a living. And current law, RCW in the state of Washington, as was mentioned earlier, schools are gun-free zones except for trained law enforcement officers, and there's some wording in the law that allows for other trained individuals, and I don't remember the exact wording. That's why you may have heard on the news recently that there are some rural districts in parts of this state where they have administrators who are armed and so forth. Again, we believe strongly in ensuring that we have armed law enforcement people.
So next we'll hear from G. Bernard Hassan, and then after that there'll be Stephanie Miller.
Hi. Okay. The first thing I'd like to do actually is, more than thank you, is to really bow down to all of you for holding this event tonight and for being here in such a large number. I am absolutely wowed by this, and to the officers that are also present. I think I speak for everyone when I say I am absolutely stunned that this place is not packed out. I cannot make head nor tail of how this has happened, because when you see all the communications going on in the press and Facebook and this and that and the other, everyone is out there rooting for this. So I'm not quite sure why this place is not as full as it should be. And so that's going to be my first question, in fact, is would you please be willing to hold this event again, because it is truly spectacular. But I can only imagine a lot of people aren't here because it's the evening, they have their kids, whatever, the routines, and maybe a weekend, Saturday would be a better day. It's just throwing it out there, because this is a phenomenal event, and it is such a pity that not more people are here. So that's my first small question. My main question, it's more personal. It relates to the 3 schools that my lovely daughter over there has attended so far in this community. And whilst I am aware of all the incredible work and attention that is being done and is being paid to this issue, it doesn't take away from me personally the ground level reality. And when I say that, what I mean is, so far in every school that my daughter has attended, I can walk into this school today and nobody seems to notice. And that eats me away. In the first school she attended, shortly after Sandy Hook, it was in fact a private school at the time. The parents did rise up, and we did manage to have windows blacked out so that you could see out but you couldn't see in. We managed to have the doors locked automatically, and like you mentioned earlier, a buzzer system with a little camera so the receptionist could see who was at the door. It's not a difficult thing to do. And the playground area was very exposed, and in fact at one point the children were subjected to hurling abuse from a man that was walking by, and so we just had the fencing screened off. So these were just little physical measures that we could take at ground level. Now, you guys are all looking at the bigger picture, and I get that. That makes a lot of sense, so you should be, absolutely. But I'm the parent, like many of us here, like all of us here, who I walk my kids in and I walk them out, and I see the physical problems of the actual school that I'm in. The second school that my daughter attended, that one is still going strong right now, and it frightens me to death, because I can walk into that school, there is a door open all the time, all the other doors are locked, but one is open, and the reception area is in a totally different area. So there is no one there to know that I'm walking into that school, and within seconds I could be in any of the classrooms. So that really freaks me out. And in the current school, which I love very much, I think the schools in this area are absolutely fabulous, and so are the teachers and all the staff. But just yesterday, I had to go to the school unexpectedly to drop something off. And the doors are meant to be locked, I know that. And I walked in one door, and lo and behold, a gentleman just walked in the other door, and he walked straight into the school, and it was like, okay, who is this guy, and why is he just walking straight into the school? You have all the kids, it was lunchtime, all the kids were right there. I walked in, and I'm supposed to go to reception to sign my name in, volunteer, or, visitor's pass, which is a good idea up to a point, but it's not going to stop a shooter. It's not a deterrence for a shooter. I walked in, and I looked at reception, and they were not aware that I was there. I went in, and there were 3 members of staff. They're doing a great job, but I'm sorry to tell you, not one of them looked up. Not one. All 3 of them were at their computers, at their counters. I walked in, I went to sign my name, and I even said hello. And no one looked up. And I turned around, and I went back out, and I stood at the edge of the canteen looking for my daughter. All of that before somebody finally came and said, "Hi, can I help you?" I'm sorry, but by then it's too late. So I was gratified to hear about the actual physical aspects that you're addressing, the access control, the phasing in of that. Brilliant. You mentioned you might have a buzzing system by summer 2018. Yay. My question is, you say it's phased in. My first question is, when will that be completed? Because yesterday would be great. I know we're under pressure. I know we have funding issues, blah, 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 but yesterday would be better. And I may be mistaken here, so I'm not quite clear. Are we focusing mainly on high school? Because that's the emphasis I keep hearing is high school. What about at middle and elementary schools in terms of this access control? That's really my main question. And the other one, which has partly been answered, is yes, the security monitors and the SROs. Why haven't we got one all day long in every single school? That to me is a bare minimum. Thank you.
Can I first start by saying thank you for not saying the school's name? Honestly, so that I can also say this. That's an unacceptable scenario you just described. I talked earlier about the protocols that we have in place, that we're communicating with our principals. We have directors of school support. Rick Burton is here tonight. Their primary responsibility is to ensure that our schools are operating in the manner that we expect them. That's security, that's safety, that's educationally. And I can tell you that in my working with the directors of school support, our discussions around safety and security have been ongoing, and it's our intention so that we don't hear those kinds of stories any longer. And so thank you for sharing that tonight, and I just want to express that it's unacceptable for me to hear that story, and it is our expectation that we stop hearing those stories, because you're not the first person to have expressed that story to us. And so I can tell you Rick has the same desire that I have to ensure that we develop these protocols, we put them in place, and that our schools are held accountable to them, because the only way that we can assure that we meet those safety goals that I spoke of earlier is that we are checking on them, that we are following through, and that it isn't just something that occurs today and then dwindles as our memories fade of events, but that this is something that we're diligent about on an ongoing basis. And so thank you again for that story, and I just, it breaks my heart to hear you say that, and I just want to assure you that that is something that we are working on right now. I'm sure you had other questions. I think Dr. Pierce, timeline for access control. It is for all of our schools. It isn't just for our high schools. And so we are working towards implementing that so that all of our schools have that same safety measure in place. The timeline for that is summer 2018.
And sorry, I wanted to jump in on that one. So he may not want to know that name of the school, but I do, so I'll meet up with you afterwards. And also, I'd like you to call 911. If you feel someone's on campus and you don't know who they are and no one checked with somebody, give us a call and have us come reach out. We're here. With hearing that, I'm super upset that I wasn't there at that school then to check it out, right? I don't know who was on campus, some guy who walked in. Please reach out and empower your friends and yourselves to say, you know, I don't know who this is. That's part of alert, right? I'm not saying alert is not only for a active shooter, violent intruder. It's an unknown person with maybe a blank stare in their eyes and you don't know why they're on campus and you'd like somebody to come figure it out. And I'm not asking you to go fight, right, and charge somebody with what are you doing here. You can get admin or get police involved and say, hey, I'd like someone out here to come check on an unknown person on campus. I may know what school you are talking about, and we have talked about volunteer groups that they're working with now, because we have to think, what are we going to do until summer 2018? And that principal is talking with a volunteer group of watchdogs to watch and monitor and be at that entrance to say, hey, welcome to this school. How are you doing? And sort of like that greeter at Walmart or at a bank. Most greeters at the bank, that bank doesn't get robbed because there's somebody that challenged them that said, oh, wow, someone's here. So we're talking with school principals about volunteers in the school to come in and sit and just say, hi, welcome to this school, until we can get that access control all the way down. So talk with the principal and see what is the status of that, how is that volunteer group going, and that's probably that next, what we're looking at there. Playgrounds, you also talked about, and observing anyone in a playground. With those concerns, it's a great, I'd like to have an answer for you. I don't have the answer, but I want to talk to somebody about, hey, what can we do with something like that? It's the first time I've ever thought of it, so it's great. And then it sounds like they knocked out the rest of them, but thank you. I'll talk with you after.
And we're all going to stick around afterwards for more conversation. We have Stephanie Miller and then Kimberly Beckwith.
Hi. I'd like to also pass along my gratitude for everybody being here tonight. So I have a middle school kid and elementary school kid, and I've always appreciated every school that we've had. The one area that I haven't seen mentioned tonight that we've sort of heard the most complaints about is the school bus. I'm a little chagrined given that I was on a school bus my whole life, and as a kid, and not having any problems with the sort of harassment and bullying that goes on. I know, I survived that, and I'm sure my own kids will. But it does seem to be a place where a lot of these sort of preventive behaviors don't happen. There's bullying, there's harassment, there's applesauce thrown. not as bad as a gun, certainly. But I'm also worried about the distracted bus driver. They should be driving the bus and not trying to manage people's behavior, especially given some of the roads that we have in our wonderful city, big drop-offs on either side. That I'd really like more focus on safety that just extends beyond the school itself, and getting people back and forth. And so one of I guess the question, instead of just a statement, is what about the volunteers? Are there room for volunteers on buses to try to help some of that behavior? What do we do about discipline to make sure the kids that are having some of these issues are maybe removed from the bus, to both protect the kids on the bus as well as the bus driver themselves?
Thank you for bringing that up. Our bus drivers do go through training on student behavior and student management, and for the most part, we have very good students and well-behaved. There's always those incidents, and when there are incidents on the buses, our bus drivers report those, work with the building principals to work with that student on behavior issues. So our bus drivers are trained on how to deal with those, and then if there are concerns, because you're right, we don't want distracted bus drivers either. So if there are concerns, they immediately work with the building principal. We do have the ability to if there are students that are acting out, to remove them from the bus service for either permanently or temporarily to deal with those issues. So, if you have a different question, we need you to sign up. I believe, right? So, but go ahead and sign in up, and then we can answer that question. So, thank you. Then, anything else? Oh, sorry. Yeah, the volunteers on the buses. We haven't had that before, so that's certainly something we could look into. And yes, there's probably room on the bus for a volunteer. So.
Okay, we have Kimberly Beckwith and then Anne Marie Charlotte.
Hi, thank you guys for being here and holding this forum. I'm a teacher in our district, and I have some questions about who checks up on schools, who holds the administrators accountable about their trainings, about their protocols in the building, about training staff, and making sure that they're aware of what protocols are and a given timeline for that. That's my first question. My second question is, how do we expedite and make sure that all schools have their site plan and their evacuation maps that are current and posted? Those are some concerns from me and other people that I'm working with in my own building. And then lastly, I just was wondering about the auto lock system and the unlocking and locking of the doors. I know that we had that put in place in our building, and there was a big concern about the fact that the emergency locking is through a widget on a computer screen, that one person had access to it in our office. And what if that person's not here? Or what if they can't log into their computer? Or what if? I know it's a lot of what ifs, but it's a concern. And I just think there has to be a better answer. I don't care if it's a red button on the wall. I mean, honestly, I think it has to happen faster than that as far as locking our main doors. We are a key card access school. It has worked great so far, but our main doors are open during school hours. And I have the same concern as this parent down here. You know, our office doors are closed. People walk into a foyer. So.
The school plans? Okay. And also speak to that piece. Do you know the system?
Right. I can talk to you.
Thank you, Kimberly. I just want to speak to kind of your first question about accountability for trainings. First, that starts every August. We have administrative trainings to make sure that all building administrators know the expectations for a variety of trainings, including safety trainings. I said earlier that the directors of school support our schools, and so they're really the ones that are ensuring and holding our administrators accountable to make sure that all of those trainings are conducted, including the safety trainings. In regards to the lockdown, the all-school lockdown, and that being a widget on one person's computer, that is part of the expansion of the system, and part of that expansion is ensuring that that is available on multiple individuals' computers, and also there's an app that's available to be able to implement that all-school lockdown as well. Thank you. App for mobile devices.
Regarding the evacuation maps that are posted, if there's a concern, all of our schools have those evacuation maps. We've designed them. If you don't have them in your school building, then that's easy. It's on our district portal, and we can help you get those printed and posted in all of your classrooms. So those are done. We just need to know you need help with that. Great.
So I'm going to give you a little rundown of who we have signed in next. We have Anne Marie Charlotte, then Corky Truen, Christina Barrows, Liz Hadreen, Brian Little, and Jeff Newcomer. We definitely want to get a chance to hear from everybody. Anne Marie?
Thank you all so much for being here. I just wanted to speak a little bit about the ALICE training. I definitely appreciate that the teachers and the kids go through the age-appropriate trainings for that. One thing that I'm seeing that's, I'm not sure if you guys have considered this, is having the parent volunteers go through the ALICE training. I volunteer at my kids' school once a week, and I'm often with a group of kids by myself in the shared space, which is a space that a potential active shooter could get to first before the trained teachers. And I don't have the ALICE training. So I'd like to suggest that all parent volunteers be required to go through the ALICE training as well as part of their requirements for volunteering. It just seems like something that would be pretty obvious to me. So is that something that's been considered before?
Yeah, thank you. That isn't something we've done in the past, as you know, but that's a great idea, and I think we'll take that and we'll develop a manner in which we can do that. That is awesome to hear. Thank you.
So it's also with your principal. So some schools I have, like there's some that have childcare on campus, and that principal is like, hey, my childcare, I'd really like them to know ALICE. So just reach out to your principal, because they're on like a plan of when ALICE is going to be trained, and then they would reach out to their volunteers and let them know. But that would be where you would go. I don't know if it's district-wide policy, right? So it would just be reaching out to your local principal and seeing if you could get into the next one that we have. Is what I've seen work. So.
Yeah, please. Just one other thing to share in that kind of same category. We also provide training for our substitute teachers. So we often have substitutes in our schools, and they are provided that training as well. And we've actually been expanding those training offerings for our substitutes.
So Corky Truin and then Christina Barrows.
Thank you. For the young lady down there who said that we have only a few people, we have 46 people here, and we have 28 up on the stands there. And in our last levy bond vote, we only got 30% of the Lake Washington School District to even turn out for a vote. So there needs to be a cultural change in the adult participation to provide a safe and viable community, not just in Kirkland, but the entire Lake Washington School District. So it's going to take a cultural change in the dynamics of our adult voters to participate so that we can fund all these changes, which brings me to my first question. Since we passed 2 levies and did not pass the bond, can we pay for all the implemented safety procedures? And with the concern for safety protocol, question number 2, how are we going to protect our children when they have to pass from a portable, because we didn't pass the bond, into a viable school where we can lock down the entire school when we can't protect them during passing time? And number 3, do we have a plan to have a monitoring system should someone pull a false alarm on the fire?
So thank you for your comments on community engagement. The question of do we have the funding to implement the safety measures that you heard this evening? Yes, since we passed the capital projects levy, the February levy, we do have the funding to expand the key card access system, implement the buzz-in system, install the cameras on the front doors, et cetera. That levy is also funding expansion of security cameras in our middle schools. Now, future funding will need to be secured to do additional enhancements in terms of facilities, or you mentioned the portables. You heard tonight the protocol around locking portables, installing the peepholes and that kind of a thing. We're implementing that, and those are no cost, low cost items. We will continue to rely on portables for our classroom space because we weren't able to pass a bond, and really we're going to continue to rely on portables on a system in our system really in the long term if we can't secure the funding needed to build more permanent classroom space. So really, our option is portables. So we will continue to have portables across the district. Today we have 171 portables, and we're adding more this summer. So the issue of portable security and the portables not being a part of the, physical permanent classroom space in the building is an issue for us. We're continuing to talk about and think about and research, are there other ways we can create security? Don't have the answers to that tonight, but to expand safety beyond what you've heard tonight will require additional funding. The caveat I want to say is the people side of safety. So if we're able to expand and provide more school resource officers or more security monitors, that funding comes out of our general fund funding, so we're looking at the potential of doing those things through general fund. Capital projects funding pays for capital, including capital investments in facilities. So I hope that answered all your questions. I think I got them all. Did I miss anything? Okay.
So we have Christina Barrows and then Liz Hedreen.
Hi. My excuse me, my little boy will be starting kindergarten in the fall, and that was a very, very scary choice for me to make, whether it's public school or private school. And I just want you to know that I feel some comfort in hearing you all speak tonight, that you care about my little boy's safety, because he's my little boy. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. I have two questions. One is really about what's happening at the elementary level beyond the door locks and training the teachers. I worry. I was able to do a tour at my child's special program, and some of the doors were just straight up glass. And I remember sitting in his classroom thinking how terrible it is that the only thought I have right now is there's nowhere for him to hide if somebody comes in. And that is not the memory I want to have of seeing my boy's kindergarten classroom for the first time. The second question I have is in regard to internal threats. We've talked a lot about external threats and mitigating that risk with lockdowns, things like that. But what is the plan or idea around internal threats? So students having weapons in their backpack or something that's already in the school. Is there any conversation around teaching gun safety to parents or having this be a larger conversation? Just curious about all of that. Thank you.
Let me speak to, my name is Forrest Miller, I'm Director of Sports Services. I'll speak to the door issue and the glazing issue. One of the things that we do in this district as we design schools, the newer schools, as well as look at the existing schools, is look at them through the lens of crime prevention through environmental design. So we're looking at how the building actually operates in terms of the access to from the outside of sight lines, as well as being able to see if there's any issues around the school itself. We are looking at the physical properties of the buildings to see what changes that we can make. Part of what we've done just recently, and it was in the slideshow, is that we're looking at all the window shades, whether they're exterior or interior, to make sure that there's appropriate coverage when it's needed. And for the interior windows, which is an important thing for us from a supervisory standpoint to keep clear, we have the ability to pull down shades now, which we didn't have in the past, so that there is that blocking of the windows. From the exterior door situation, or the exterior glazing, we have mini blinds, but also we are installing other types of shading materials so that we could take care of those glass doors. They could be some things that we do for those glass doors is we provide some opaque material or to be able to be so that you can't see through part of that, as well as we have other means for us to be able to address those windows themselves that we're implementing. We're in a kind of a evaluation stage too to see if the products are working the way they need to, so that there is appropriate locking down and that inability to be able to see through. So we're going through and evaluating it with the principals and with the schools.
And I'd like to say a couple of words about gun safety. The city of Kirkland is going to be undertaking a body of work in the next year to talk about what we can do at a local level about gun safety. The council's very concerned about this. We have our expert staff here. They're coming up with some ideas about what we can do, about education, about, we are limited at a local level, but can we advocate for change at a state level? Absolutely. Can we make sure that we're doing absolutely everything we can in our community to encourage and educate around gun safety? Absolutely, and we intend to do that. So just watch our progress. I think you had another question, though. Wasn't there one more?
I'll speak a little bit to,
Yeah.
I don't know if these microphones are picking up or not. The internal threats, so we talked a little bit about how as schools we require risk assessments if a student's been removed from school. And a couple of things. One, that can trigger a series of interventions, but also you mentioned like backpacks and things like that. So when we return students after a risk assessment, that we'll build a safety plan for that student, and so that can and may include like searches. Sometimes it's check in, check out, or for some students, you're not allowed to have a backpack on campus. So we take that, so depending on the nature of the threat, the student, and the outcomes of the risk assessments in those contexts. So those students might have tighter levels of supervision, and as well as some restrictions, so that we can ensure that they're able to operate safely and be safe with other students at that school.
Yeah, and you bring up my worst case scenario when I talk to the teachers. We train for, I call it when they have the slip on you. They are in, you can't lock down, it is right next to you and the fight is brought to you. And we train the teachers with the swarm technique, practicing taking down the arms, body parts, limbs, laying on the person, disarming, taking it away, and not picking up the gun and pointing at the person, but putting a trash can on top of it so that when police show up, there's not someone who's just holding a weapon. So our teachers know what to do. We're talking the lunch scenario when it's brought at the lunchroom, right? A very bad scenario, or what we train them is what to do in that swarm and taking down that threat, instead of traditionally where it would be locked down everybody now under the table and let that person go through and carry out what they wanted. We are countering and taking back to try to reduce the number of what that person came in to do. So they are mentally prepared and going through the training with Nerf guns and what we do, but we put them through these real life scenarios and teaching them how to go and practicing for that worst case scenario. And also getting the parents involved is key here. We're talking super like worst case scenario, that right now bad problem, but we got to think about the long run in how do we get the parents involved in the kids' lives. These volunteers that I talked about earlier at that safety committee advisory meeting this week or this month, it's about the positive interaction with one adult with these kids, and they're in that elementary age, is super important. And that's what we need to think about, is identifying that those children who don't have somebody to talk to and having just maybe a solid, positive adult figure in their life. And then also, it's super easy to say like, oh, it's my kid. Like, why is my kid not going up and saying hi to that kid who is alone at lunch, right? But what are parents doing? Who are you calling before this community meeting, right? Have we reached out to those families that we don't know we should reach out to, that you guys are all here, I'm stoked for you, but I need the other ones who are not here. And so I really need you to reach out, and during those beginning meetings at school, when you get rosters and you meet people, reach out to them throughout the year and make sure they show up to these things, and be good influences on what you want your kids to do by reaching out to those families that don't have anyone that's really reaching out to them. Show your kids what you want them to do at school when they're by themselves. So that was just something that we talked about at that safety advisory committee meeting. So.
Two quick things I'd like to add. Historically, we have implemented different safety protection measures at elementary, middle, and high school because the needs are typically different. Of course, there's some things that apply to all schools. We are, however, continually looking at and actively talking about today, are there additional things that we need to do by level? So that's on our plate and on our radar. And then the other quick thing I'd just like to add is that in all of my reading and researching into some of these tragic situations that have occurred or incidents where a student has brought a gun to school and thankfully a tragic event did not follow, there was someone or often multiple people who had that information. And so the more we can create a culture in our schools between our teachers and our students and our teachers and parents, and ensuring that students know and parents know you have to report anything that you are aware of or that you're seeing on social media is so important because the reality is, having metal detectors or banning backpacks or those kinds of things are really not feasible given the resources and staffing that we have. So I know ideally we'd like to be able to know what's in each student's backpack every day, but today the best way we can know that information is by people ensuring that they're sharing information about potential threats.
Okay, we have Liz Hadreen and then Brian Little.
Hi, thank you for being here. As a parent, obviously the school shooting is terrifying, but if you actually read about gun violence, school violence is actually just a small piece of it. And, the school shooting this is just the latest site. I mean, if you read the Seattle Times, there's shootings all the time. And, it's domestic violence or gun suicides. And, just in the last several years, there have been deaths at my children's schools from gun suicides. So I guess I have two questions. One is, has there been research about what is more effective? Is it more effective to spend money on more counselors to help with mental health in the schools? Or is it more effective to spend money on more security people? So I don't know if anybody knows the answer to that, but I'm hearing a lot about sort of security, and you mentioned the counselors, but like as a parent at the high school, the counselors are just so busy, so we just need more of them. And then my second question is, and Mayor Wallen, you kind of addressed this, but I didn't know if you had more to expand on it. Is there something that the City of Kirkland, the council, are there things that you wish that could be passed here at the city level that you think would be helpful to our citizens here? And is there something that the community can help you do to get those things passed?
So in response to your question about which is more effective, it's kind of the overall support, staffing levels, things like that, or security measures. From everything I've read, it really points back to that comprehensive view of it. It isn't one over the other. It's making sure that you have the elements of that comprehensive emergency management plan, that you have high quality prevention measures in place, that you have high quality protection measures, and all of those pieces in place versus saying we're just going to do one of these things and ignore the other. So from everything I've read, that's really been, it's making sure that it's a broad array of supports, both human capital and making sure your facilities are safe.
And thank you for asking me about the gun safety thing. This is something I care a lot about. And all of my colleagues are trapped over there. They don't have microphones. They can't argue with me or disagree. Just kidding. But this is so I'm speaking for myself only. not for all of my colleagues, the conversations to come. I grew up in Australia, and there were not a lot of guns around, and kids didn't go to school afraid of being killed or hurt, or these drills that are so necessary here. It's just not something that I believe we should have in our country. So it's my personal opinion that we should have, if we could as a city, I would not allow gun stores. I would have ammunition on taxes, or taxes on ammunition. I would ask that we send a letter to anybody who sells guns that they don't sell to anyone under 21, that we did background checks, that we did a lot of what traditionally is known as gun control, but I am trying to couch in terms of gun safety. And I do think that you grow up in a rural area, and hunting and fishing and all those things are wonderful. This is a very urbanized area, and we just don't really need a lot of guns in our society. So this is just my personal view. I've asked the staff, we have asked the staff to explore everything that we can do at a city level to make sure that if, within the bounds of the state law, that we are getting as much education out there and just doing the maximum that we can do. And then we'll have the conversation amongst ourselves to see what, as a council, we can agree on. And I think that we might agree on is adding to our legislative agenda at the state level for much more strict gun safety rules in our state. So I hope to see that, and thank you. And I hope that, and you will absolutely have an opportunity to help us, because we will need every voice in this room and many more. Okay, so we're going to hear from Bryant Little and then Jeff Newcomer.
Hi there. I wanted to talk a little bit about access to children before school. My student is, about to be second student, goes to Sandburg, where there's a large outdoor area. And the situation that scares me the most is the amount of free roaming, the amount of access to children. If you wanted to make a really large impact with a firearm, that would be the place to do it. I know there are teachers out there, but I don't know what the safety plan is, or if there are processes or plans in place already at that school to kind of mitigate the damage that could be done in that scenario. And the second part of that is also that Sandburg has their common areas where children eat, where they transition them back to their classrooms. Everything is glass. And I don't know if we were talking about facilities earlier, if there's been care or thought put into bullet resistant or some type of glass. It seems to me that there would be nothing to stop a person from gaining access to school just by shooting through the glass and making a large dent. So, thank you.
Sorry, we're just trying to determine who's the right person. I'll take a shot at it. Our safety measures, our plans are anytime students are on campus. And so when we think about our emergency preparedness, we also plan for when students are out at recess. And what do we do in the case of needing to get all students from the playground into the school? And so that would be the same for before school as well. I will also say that it just reminds me that we need to make sure that all of our schools are thinking about that before school piece as well. So I just appreciate the question, and it helps remind us of all of the different things we need to be considering. As far as, I think you asked the question around the commons area, the glassing and things like that. Director Miller spoke about that a little bit earlier. And so I don't know if you have other commentary that you want to make about the site specific.
I mean, the challenge, we have heard or had questions about installing bulletproof glass, and I think the challenge is that it's very cost prohibitive. So, I mean, we'll have to continue to we'll continue to think about different, options around that. We also have to remember our schools are built. We also want our kids to have the best education, and that involves sunlight and lighting, and so with that comes glass and windows. And so it's the balance of making sure our students are taught in an environment that is conducive to learning and education. So that's the challenge.
We have Jeff Newcomer, and then Sally Blackford, and then Marwa Badam. So Jeff.
Thank you all for being here. I apologize I was late. I was at the PTSA meeting. I actually wanted to bring up the subject of arming teachers, but I understand that that has been kind of one of those that we're not going to do. Is that a correct statement? And that was the mayor's decision? Or whose decision?
I can speak to that really
Yes.
quickly. Earlier, the question was raised, and I shared that as a district, we believe strongly in having our law enforcement officials who are armed, keeping the focus on those people, and potentially expanding the number of armed resource officers that we have in our schools.
Okay, and then, so if those of us who believe that we would like to see teachers armed, if they feel like they would be more safe and they are trained, who do we go to above you?
Yeah, so I will tell you that we haven't had an in-depth dialogue about this topic with the board of directors. So we have a board of directors who governs our school system, and so any decision about if we were to change direction would be one held in conjunction with our board of directors. So you're welcome to contact any of our board of directors or email me directly and share your thoughts on the topic for sure.
Okay, so the school board of directors, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, yeah, that would be great, because I'd like to see that consideration, because I mean, I'm in the minority, obviously, of people, because like for me, I carry concealed all the time, and I know that I pray to God that gun never sees the light of day. Mm-hmm. And there are those that will fight your gun laws. We are out here. But I want to make known too that we care as much about our kids as everyone else. So I just would like to maybe have that discussion, or the board have that discussion if a teacher is trained, because there are safes with fingerprint ID where kids could not get into it, but only that person registered to that weapon who feels comfortable enough to be trained in that, to have that. So thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Newcomer, there are 3 board members here, and they'll be around afterwards to chat with you. Okay. Sally Blackford, and then Marwa Badam.
Hi, thank you very much. Back to the bus, Stephanie spoke and our kids are on the same bus. There has been 20 instances over the school year. My daughter is 11, she's a 6th grader at a middle school. Every day, there's 3 kids to a seat, it's crowded, it's loud, it's noisy, there is nasty words said every day. Words that I'm like, oh my God, I barely know what they are. The language. Then on top of that, applesauce on her head, pasta on her head, water bottles thrown. I can go on and on. I've called the principal, I've called the district office, I've left them messages. In addition, the bus driver cannot see the back of the bus. The kids know it's a bus driver and them. Something's got to change. I have texts on my phones, I have videos on my phones, and what would all of you do if that was your 11-year-old on that bus? I know you answered the question earlier.
No, so I appreciate you bringing that to our attention, and I would like to talk to you afterwards to get to specifics of your situation, because that is not acceptable behavior for a bus, and it shouldn't keep continuing. So I would like to talk to you afterwards and get details.
Okay, and all that gets done is they're off the bus for 3 days and they're back on it, and it's just as important for them to get to school as everyone else. It's a what do you do situation.
So let's touch base afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Marwa Badam, and then that is the end of our sign up. So if you'd like to speak, please do sign up, or I'll call on you at the end if you want to just raise your hand.
Hi, thank you for everyone is here. My question, why the schools they don't have a metal detector at the front gates and back doors, hallways like the airports? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and that has been a question that has come to my attention from a handful of parents recently. And the example that people often give is that after the tragic events of September 11th, that's when airports began having TSA and the whole screening process and so forth. And that was really a federal level effort when you think about the scope of that and the cost and the personnel required. Today, given our resources as a school district, we just simply don't have the resource to install metal detectors, because it's not just the installation of the equipment, it's having the person there who's trained to use the equipment. It's the individual screening of people, it's the time intensive nature of it. And so the other piece of it, if I have done some initial research on the topic, and there's sort of two schools of thought. One, that they're a good idea, and two, that they're not a good idea in terms of the culture of the school and kind of the feeling of kind of making our schools prison-like. I can tell you today it's probably a topic that we need to research more and study more, but we just simply, with our resources today, wouldn't have the resources to implement such a system.
So Kathy, we have no more sign-in. No. Okay. Would anyone like to come forward and talk to us before we call it an evening? Okay, well, thank you very much for being here. I think this district has a couple of more meetings that they're going to tell you about before we say goodnight.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, we have planned forums such as this in each of our 3 cities. So tonight was the first forum here in Kirkland, and then we have upcoming forums in the city of Sammamish at Eastlake High School, and in the city of Redmond at Redmond High School. And the dates for those are, if anyone can help me remember, I think it's next Tuesday at the in Sammamish, and it's the first week of or the second week of April, I believe, with the city of Redmond. So again, appreciate everybody's time tonight, and as Mayor Wallen mentioned, we'll hang around a little bit. So if you want to talk to us individually, we'll be here. Thank you.
We also have feedback forms if you'd like to fill one out and tell us about how we did tonight. But we'll all be here for you.